Welcome to Soccerex TV, powered by Football Business Television. I have Toan Ravenscroft. How are you, Toan?
Good.
Welcome to Soccerex TV.
Thanks for having me.
From MSQ Sport and Entertainment. We want to talk about a little about your journey into marketing and sports entertainment.
Sure.
And then also what are you currently doing. But I want you to start with your journey, how you got where you are currently.
Sure. Well, thanks very much for having me on. It's
a loaded question.
It's nice to look back and think about it. Well, I've spent my whole entire career in the agency side of things, and the vast majority of that career, probably the last 20 years, focused on the specialism around sport and entertainment, communications, marketing. So I've always worked in big agency groups, and around under 2 years ago, we set up MSQ Sport and Entertainment. So two founders in London, Steve Martin and Jamie Wynn Morgan, and then I came on board here in Amsterdam to open, and then we've opened in New York too. So yeah, really fast-growing agency.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about some of the global campaigns that you've done over the last few years, and also the ones that you're currently working on.
Yeah, sure. I can start with the current one maybe as hot off the press. I was just saying, I went to El Clásico at the weekend. We were there to launch Duracell, their partnership with LaLiga.
Okay.
So, and I think it's a really good example for us of what we try and do and how we try to bring things to life. Really find that hook and a way in for fans that's interesting. Duracell have taken a fantastic asset. They've taken the added time board. Now, I don't think if anyone understands Duracell and what they mean as a brand about power, being unstoppable, energy, long-lasting.
Yeah.
That added time board when it comes up in a stadium, and you know it's 3 or 5 or 10 minutes left in the.
You have the Duracell.
It's going to be Duracell branded from August. And so this weekend we were communicating that with a group of kind of very influential, handpicked media creators, creating content out in Barcelona, and then we went through to El Clásico at the weekend, and that's pretty typical for us. We come in often when it's a real specialist need, a group of people that we want to start telling that story with and start building what's the platform, how do we find something that sits brilliantly within fan interest, brand interest, and the sports properties interest. So that's kind of where we work.
That's awesome. And nowadays, especially like marketing with social media, influencers, there's a lot of players, right, that get into like a global campaign. So
sure.
How do you manage to get that cohesive message across different platforms and different indicators?
I think you're right. I think it's changed a lot. I think the marketing model has evolved even faster in the last 5 years, and we're going through a huge change right now with AI, as is everyone. Yeah. But I think for us, the way that we're seeing brands being built, there was a traditional model, a sort of top-down model, big ATL TVC campaigns, and they still have a huge value, but those, your product, your retail placement, whereas now I think brands are being built, especially with Gen Z and even looking further into Gen Alpha, through experience, through feeling, touching. That's a good pushback to the world that's evolving, through content, through those creators and influencers. And I think what we've seen, and we spoke about it a lot actually ahead of the Olympics and the last Euros, we're seeing athletes, footballers as some of the biggest creators, some of the most trusted, some of the most impactful. When you start looking at their benchmark engagements, for example, they skew way higher than any other standard creator and influencer. So it's, I think to come back to your point, it's certainly a thing that we have to build in, and they're fantastic if they're professional at delivering.
In terms of that, I think that's really interesting, and the fan engagement, right? Talking about sports in particular, football. You touched a little bit on AI, but how's like also AI like changing the game in particular with fan engagement? And how do you see, like, let's say millennials versus other like Gen Z or Alpha consuming that content?
I think there's something really interesting going on there. And I think there's a reason why sponsorship more broadly is growing 6 to 8% per year. That is because there is fewer and fewer moments of true communion, mass communion, people coming together to watch a game, whether that's live, highlights, coming together, or seeing it in a stadium. And I think that there's a really interesting moment going on around that, and that's why we're seeing football and brands looking to play in that space, because it's a rare moment of actual cut-through, and it's also a really fast shortcut to cultural credibility. Any marketer that you speak to at the moment will be talking about, I want to be showing up in culture, or do culture-first marketing. What do they mean by that? And sometimes you have to press. But sport and entertainment is true culture. I don't know who you support, your fandom. I have my fandom. These are the things we're passionate about. But if you show up in that space, you've got to do so really with a deep understanding of that fandom, because otherwise you're just expensive wallpaper. Well done. You're another brand on logo on a board. How do you go deeper? How do you really connect? And that's where we want to play. And I think AI is helping us do that. And we're completely AI-enabled agency, helping us get to those thoughts faster, helping us build campaigns quicker. But there's always going to be that human craft and that element and creativity that really cuts through. And I think that that's where we want to play, in that space of creativity and coming up with those ideas which can live in lots of different formats.
Yeah, that's amazing. And having that organic experience for the consumer and the fan, right? I think following up on this, it's really interesting how you touch on the culture, because I see, World Cup is going to be in 30 days, right?
Cool. That's come fast.
It's kind of, yeah. And how brands, like big brands, I would say, even like, let's say football jerseys, are using that cultural aspect to gain, that new followers that maybe they're not like per se football fans, right? But they get connected through like that story of the product.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure everyone's seen the Adidas campaign that launched earlier this week, last week. It's a great example of that. And that crossover, we see that a lot. We see that a lot with our clients. How do you cross over from, whether that's music, people really highly influential in culture? Timothy Chalamet features in that, and brings that through with some nostalgia links when you've got Beckham being created and all those players kind of brought back, as well as players right up to the modern day, and you got Jude sitting in the back of a car. Or, there was the Lego campaign, which was, I think, really broke the internet a couple of weeks ago. Some of my friends were working on that. How they managed to assemble that cast of goats. It's really, you're starting to see people muscle up now in front of the World Cup, and I think that was always to be expected around, especially USA being the center of those three host markets. Our team are doing work as well around that out in New York, and they're very busy. They're just on the Coca-Cola World Cup Trophy Tour, so there's lots going on out there. Right.
That's really insightful and interesting, because talking about Adidas, right? Like there's even this campaign talking about like the third jersey for Mexico that would launch, I think, yesterday.
I saw it.
And they use this this Mexican brand that they really use like local artists and craftsmen. And I think I know at least talking as a millennial, it wasn't cool, let's say 15 years ago. And now it's definitely the cool factor that's added on to a regular jersey, right?
And a word that gets thrown around a lot is authenticity. That's authentic. They've gone in, they've really understood the audience, the group, and I've seen the pictures of the lady with the kind of cloth all laid out. Fantastic. They've gone deeper, and I think we're seeing that. We actually work with Under Armour on a project that's sort of adjacent to football, if you like, Under Armour Next, and it's all about going in and finding things for 16 to 21-year-olds that they are really relevant in their culture. And this one happens to take place in London. And then it actually goes through to giving them a professional contract with Under Armour to help them build for what's next in their careers and their journeys. And you think, okay, well, now we're showing up. We're not just showing up and going, hey, we're going to shoot something in a cafe or shoot something in a chicken shop. It's really much deeper than that. And I think we're starting to see the results with that.
In terms of what's coming next, and from your perspective, the future of sports marketing, how do you see it in 5 to 10 years?
I think what we're seeing and what we've always been at hopefully the forefront of, and something that we're seeing more and more now, is sponsorship is moving from a media play to really a creative platform, and we're seeing lots of brands think of it that way, being more creative. I think there's going to be an interesting moment of friction and offline being back in vogue. That's happening more broadly in the kind of creative world at the moment, and I think that will play out as well, where you're going to see people going, I think there's going to be a pushback to some of the overload of content that we're seeing. I think brands are going to try and be even more creative, and that might be being more analog. So I'm quite excited about looking at how that's going to go and keep thinking ahead about what's coming next, what's coming down the line, because I think there'll be interesting trends.
That's interesting. So in terms of analog, like coming back to original roots maybe a little bit, or?
Yeah, and I think that's a great example, the one you said of the Mexican. That's offline. That's something real. That's something you can touch and feel. And I think we're going to start seeing that. We're seeing already campaigns being shot in a very different way. We actually shot a piece of content about 3 or 4 months ago purely on film, not digital.
Oh, wow.
And I think we're going to see a lot more people playing with those concepts as we look for different ways of breaking through, and that aesthetic starts to come to life.
That's amazing. I love the insight, Toan.
Hey,
thank you so much.
Pleasure to be here.
Appreciate it. Thank you for your here at Soccerex TV.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.